Welcome everyone to this online workshop entitled Participant Engagement in Longitudinal Population Studies and Cohorts, organized by my colleague Isabel Budan-Ljosne from Biobank Norway and myself, Monica Canovadia from BBMRI-ERIC. Today is the first session of this two-day workshop, and we hope that you will also join us this Thursday at the same time at from 2 to 4 p.m. First, a few words about us. BBMRI-ERIC is a biobanking and biomolecular resources research infrastructure that facilitates access to sample and data collections across Europe. For this purpose, BBMRI-ERIC has a network of national nodes in the member countries and a team of interdisciplinary experts in medicine, social sciences, patient communities, IT, etc. Within BBMRI, the ELSI Services and Research Unit provides support on ethical, legal, and societal issues. Our three key cornerstones are research and service and training. We are involved in multiple projects and we conduct research there. We support our community through our knowledge base and our help desk, and we organize training such as this workshop. Isabel will say a few words about Biobank Norway.
Hi everyone. Isabel Budan-Ljosne is my name. So I'm representing Biobank Norway today. Biobank Norway is the national node of BBMRI-ERIC. It was established in 2010. And it covers both clinical and population-based biobanks. It covers the country's largest universities, health authorities, the Norwegian Institute of Public Health, but it is my institute, and the Cancer Research of Registry. And as it is probably the case in other national nodes as well, we are organizing work packages, and we have a common services, ELSI, which I'm taking care of in Biobank Norway.
Thank you, Isabel. This webinar is being recorded and it will be made available online on our knowledge base and on our website. And for the Q&A sessions, please use the chat box to write your questions, and the moderator will read them on your behalf, and then the speakers will be able to answer to your questions. So please interact in the chat box as much as you want. Isabel, the floor is yours again.
Yes, so a little bit about the background for this workshop. We all know that cohorts are depending on the contributions of their participants to be sustainable over time. But the challenge is that participants drop out for a variety of reasons, or may not answer to data collection requests, or they may lose interest, or they may grow up and do not feel the same connection to the cohort as they used to be, or as their mothers or fathers used to, or they may move. There are a variety of reasons why we might lose our participants. So we see as participant engagement as a way to maintain the interest of participants in the study and encourage their participation and commitment over time. So this is really what we want to look at during this workshop. So next slide, please. So a core objective of this workshop is to discuss and present participant engagement strategies used by some key European cohort studies, with the indirect objective to also build a network of cohorts that are dedicated to participant engagement and want to share their practices and experiences. We are also interested in mapping practices for engagement in European cohorts, and we'll tell you more about this on the second day of our workshop. And we're also interested in looking at potential ways to connect with other initiatives, such as the BBMRI-ERIC Pediatric Biobanking Initiative, led by Sara Casati from BBMRI Italy. Next slide. So this is our agenda. We have two sessions. In today's sessions, we'll have three presentations, two from the UK and one from Italy. There will be some time for questions after each presentation, and we also have a little session at the end for a Q&A and more exchange. So please get ready to ask questions. And on the second day, if you just show the next slide, please. we will have 4 presentations. So we'll continue our conversations and have some time at the end for discussing how to move forward with our work. So that's the plan for our 2 sessions. But now let's start with our first session and our first speaker. I'm very pleased to welcome Lin Malloy, who is Chief Operating Officer of the Avon Longitudinal Study of Parents and Children, also very well known as Alsbach. And Lin, I hope you're here. I cannot see the full list of participants. Lin, are you with us?
I do not see Lynn on the list, actually. So maybe we can go to our second speakers, which I do not see either on the list of participants.
Mm-hmm. Are you sure everyone got the right
problem there with their
maybe the jet lag, the time, the UK.
Oh, that could be the case, but I think we've informed about this being during European Central Time.
Yeah.
So,
well, maybe we can go on to Constanza's presentation,
okay.
And in the meantime, we try to find the others.
Yes,
fine with me.
Sorry about this, Constanza. But
no problem, no problem. I mean, it's fine. Just need to share my screen then.
So Costanza is with us on behalf of the Italian Ninfea study.
Yep. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Great. I will put in the presentation. Okay. Great. Okay. Thank you, Monica and Isabel, for inviting me. I speak on behalf of the Ninfea study, which is conducted here at the University of Turin in Italy. And in particular, we talk you about recruiting and engaging participants in a web-based cohort, as Ninfea is based on the internet, in the sense that we recruited through the internet about 7,500 pregnant women between 2005 and 2016. We recruited the participant all over Italy, although the study started as a pilot study in the city of Turin only, in the Piedmont region. And from 2007, then it was extended to the rest of the country. And we also carry out the follow-up using online questionnaire, and at the moment we have follow-up at 6 and 18 months, and then when the child turns 4, 7, 10, and 13 years of age. And we are currently working on the 16-year follow-up. And the core of our project is, of course, the website, which is www.progettoninfea.it. This is the homepage, the English version of the homepage. And as you can see, there are quite few sections here, and I will talk you about some of them later in this presentation. So, being a web-based cohort, we advertised study both using 2 different approaches, active and passive, so offline and online approaches. The active recruitment, which is more the traditional one, has been carried out in selected areas, and in particular in the Piedmont and Tuscany region, through collaboration with the local center, attaching leaflets to the results of the laboratory test, and in the main hospital, in the poster in the main hospital, and also presenting the study at pre-delivery classes. But of course, given the nature of our study, we had also to use online approaches. And in particular, we posted information about the studies in discussion forums dedicated on medical topics, a website dedicated to pregnant women, website of the main Italian hospitals and of the Italian Association for Disease. And we also conducted a dedicated campaign of recruitment through Facebook. This is a map showing, I hope you can see, or no, I'm not sure whether the color are okay, but I hope you can see, is to give you an idea of the geographical distribution of the NIFEA community. In particular, these maps show the distribution of the about 80,000 new users of the website. So these are not the participants, are the subjects who access the website of the NIFEA study between 2007, when we activated the Google Analytics tools on the NIFEA project, and few weeks ago. So who are the members of the NIFEA community? The inclusion criteria of our study was to have access, mother who had access to the internet and enough knowledge of the Italian language to and volunteer to participate anytime during pregnancy, registering in the website and completing the first online questionnaire. So clearly we are aware that this is a selected population, of course, selected in terms of several factors, for sure in terms of socio-economic factors. And the member of our community, therefore, the NIFEA community is not representative of a population characterized geographically, as it could be in several other traditional cohorts, but is representative of a larger population, which in theory includes any pregnant woman who is interested in the study and meets the inclusion criteria. In the last decade, I think there has been a lot of debate about and discussion on the appropriateness of the use of non-representative source populations, such as the NIFEA study, in order to study to address a theological question. And we have contributed to this literature, carry out quite few methodological studies to evaluate the impact of using such source population and show that scientific inference does not require representativeness. And I've listed here some of the methodological study that we have carried out in this field. So, as I've said, not only recruitment has been carried out using the internet, but also the follow-up are carried out using online questionnaires. So this means that we do not have a direct contact with our participants, neither at the baseline nor later at the different follow-up occasion. For this reason, in order to enhance participant engagement, we had to activate specific tools and activities to maintain contacts and enhance participant engagement. And I've listed here the main one, and I will spend a few words for each of them. So, of course, the main channel used to communicate with participants is the email, because we invite participants to fill in the follow-up questionnaires when it is time to fill in the different questionnaires using the email. And also we remind them at the first stage, if they do not reply and fill in the questionnaires, we remind them to do it with email. And only at the second stage, we use telephone or other channel. We also use email occasionally to inform participants about relevant publications, projects and events they might be interested in. And for subgroups, to a subgroup, we send a newsletter, the subgroup that subscribe to the newsletter, but I will talk about newsletter in a second. Moreover, the other direct channel of communication is through the comments, as participants are can always send us comments. In particular, we invite them to send us comments to each questionnaires, because they can find a specific free text field at the bottom of each, at the end of each follow-up questionnaires. And also they can always send us comment and question, and also suggestion on the topics to be included in the NINFEA data section, which I will talk you in a second, using the general project email address. News and newsletter. So since the 2005, we have posted in our website more than 100 news from 2000 onwards, and these news are usually related to publications involving the NINFEA participants, new data in the NINFEA data section, relevant facts that might be interesting for family and pregnant women or families, and link to other relevant projects. And as I've said before, we also send this information via email to all the participants who have subscribed to our newsletter, which is also open to the scientific community or other decision makers that want to subscribe to the newsletter. And from 2018, we send 3 newsletters per year. Of course, we use the social networks. As I've said before, we have used Facebook. Use Facebook to recruit subjects with a specific campaign on Facebook. And since 2009, we opened a Facebook page, an NINFEA Facebook page. We have now about 2,200 followers, and we have a YouTube channel that we only use to post some of the video that we have produced during the year. And recently we have also opened a Twitter and Instagram account. And this is just a picture of I think this is Instagram, a picture of the post that sometimes we only post pictures, sometimes we post information. And the sentence here, me and mom, is a really beautiful thing. One of the main aspects involving focus on participant engagement in our study is for sure the NINFEA data section that we have started in 2016. This is a section of the NINFEA website. This is the link dedicated the aim of this section is to make available to the participant, but obviously also to the scientific community, the decision maker, and all the citizenship that would like to access to this website, is to make available descriptive statistic in aggregate form on the characteristic of our participant, both in terms of exposure or outcome of mothers and children. And we try to focus on those variables that are not covered by local or national or international surveillance system, in order to contribute to enrich the wealth of information available to the population, and of course to contribute to the participant engagement. It is a way to give them back something. This is an example of, if I go back, I don't know, yeah, I can go back here, sorry. I just would like to show you in the NINFEA website. So, I'm sorry, this is in Italian, but the NINFEA data section is this one, dati, which means data in English. And so if you click on that, this subsection here will appear, is structured in terms of mothers and between mothers and children. And the information that is currently available on this section is about lifestyle of pregnant women, baby health, baby's behavior and lifestyle, and environmental exposure. For example, here the graph is showing the distribution, a descriptive statistic on the time of introduction of solid food in the children diet, and it just shows you that the majority of the family of the NINFEA family introduce solid food at 5th month, and or at 6 months is about 30%, 10% after the 6 months, and only 7% before the 4th month. And these are the kind of graphs and or tables that we post in this section. And sometimes we also attach link to this graph. Some info, for example, here we have linked to the family the information about the suggestion that the World Health Organization gives about the time of introduction of solid food. We have produced few video, but actually the one quite few years ago to describe, it was really short to describe the INFAIR project, but probably the most important one, the one we have spent quite few time on, is this documentary, which is called INFAIR Birth and Development of a Research Project, that has been realized quite recently, last year, in occasion of the 15 years of the INFAIR project. And we have tried through this documentary, through this video, to describe the project, giving voices to the multidisciplinary team of the study. So there are several persons working on the INFAIR project, explaining different aspects of this project. And I think, and of course, this was also sent as a newsletter and posted as a new in the website, and also posted on the Facebook and Instagram page, and of course on the YouTube channel. We have organized and participated quite few dissemination events. We have organized an event in 2014 called The 9 Months That Shape Your Life. This was a day, it lasted a day. The first part of the event was a workshop, so a scientific workshop dedicated to the scientific community. But the second part was the day was open to the citizenship, and of course we invited the INFAIR participant. It was held in Turin, and therefore we invited only the participant of the Piedmont region. But we all participated then to other 3 events, dissemination events, one in 2005 in occasion of the Expo Turin in 2015. One, we participated to a non-competitive race to raise funds for the research as an INFAIR team. And also we participated to a festival held here in close to Turin, on Innovation and Science Festival in 2018, always promoting and explaining the INFAIR project. And the last thing I would like to talk is the INFAIR Teen website. This is a web page dedicated to the children, so the boys and girls participating in the project. It has been thought at the time of the when we launched the 13-year questionnaires, this was the first occasion when we start asking questions directly to the children, although always through their mothers. So in order to address this, the boys and the girls participating in the project, we thought that it would have been useful to explain them what is a core study, what is the INFAIR project, and why they are member of this study. So we have we link to the invitation of fill in the 13-year questionnaire. It is the link to this web page where we try to address this question. As I've said before, this is quite a relevant topic to us. As I've said before, we are about to launch the 16-year questionnaire, and soon the boys will be, in Italy, we can approach and address directly the children when they turn 18 years. So this is going to be the last. In a few years, we will need to address directly the boys and the girl instead of the mothers. And so this is quite a relevant topic at the moment here. We are trying to discuss, and of course we are really keen to learn about from the other course how they address this issue. And this is just a list of the publication we have worked on, focus on either on methodological aspect of how the web-based design might affect attrition and question item no response, and there are then few papers focused on communication with the participant and the DINIFEA data section. I think that's all I have to say. I would like to thank all the DINIFEA team, in particular Lorenzo Ricciardi and Paolo Evaldi, and of course the DINIFEA participant, and thank you for the attention.
Thank you very much, Constanza. We have a few questions already on the chat, and if we don't have time now to answer them, do not worry, because we have the longer Q&A session later, so everything will be answered today. One of the questions was, do you have data on how many, on the percentage of people who were recruited online and offline?
We have them, yes, because it's an information. Actually, I can't remember it, so I will have to look at it in the publication and let you know. Although, no, in the baseline questionnaire, I think we ask a question on how they were aware of the study. I think that's the kind of information that we have, but I have to say that I can't remember now the distribution, so I need to check it and let you know.
Another question is, have the DINIFEA participants ever asked for more than digital communication? For example, physical meetings, interactions at conferences, etc.
Not really. We had quite few, few mothers that, addressed us maybe with email, and a couple of them who came visiting us here in our office and asked to discuss, to discuss some of the topic, but no, I don't think I don't think they asked to have, clinical visits or something like that, but few of them interact with us mainly via email, and few of them also visiting our offices, let's say.
Do you have information about participant satisfaction? How user-friendly they find the recruitment, the follow-up process?
We always ask them about whether they have trouble, and they can always, as I said before, there is a free field text, and we ask them to send us any comments, any specific comments on the questionnaires, or whether they have trouble or whether something was unclear. So we use this free text box at the end of each questionnaire, both the baseline and the follow-up one.
Thank you. We still have time for some more questions. Are also, you talked about mothers now in one of your responses, are fathers also involved? And if so, what is their participation rate?
I talk about mothers because the, let's say, majority, almost 100% of the participants are the mothers who fill in the questionnaires, because probably because they, we due to the recruitment to advertisement approaches, but it's not compulsory that is the mother that have to fill in the questionnaire. But we had, we expect the mothers to fill in the questionnaires, and we have questions about the partner or the father of the child. Although for the, at the time of when the project started, we had quite few problems with the ethical commission in asking through the mother information regarding the father. So we have information about education, occupation, and other lifestyle factors, but now we have the participants are the mothers and the children, of course.
We have still a couple more questions. Also, Isabel, feel free to jump in if you have also some questions on your side. One more that comes from the chat box is, in which way do you motivate participants to recruit other participants?
Now recruitment is closed, because recruitment closed, it was between 2005 and 2016. We did not, if you ask whether we specifically did something in order to ask our participants to spread the voice about the INFAIR project, no, as far as I can remember, but it happened, of course, that we had participants participating because of other participants. Yeah.
Thanks. Two more questions, and we are right on time. How was privacy maintained during these email communications with participants?
Our ethical commission approved the study. We had the possibility, of course, to have in our, the information, the IT guys have the web, the table with the information about name and email addresses. But I'm not sure whether, what does this mean? I'm not sure whether I have understood the question, in which sense how privacy was maintained. Of course, we do not send, massive email. There is a system in which each woman receive, they have a password, they have login and a password, and we always only send them an email when it is time for them to complete the questionnaire, inviting them to log in the website and participate. But I'm not sure whether I have understood the question, so I'm not sure whether I've addressed it.
I only have the information on the chat box, so if the question needs a little bit more clarification, please, the person that posted it can explain it a little bit longer, and then we can address that issue in the final Q&A. And one last question for you, Constanza.
Mm-hmm.
How was the response of the participants to the dissemination event? How many of them attended the seminar?
Of course, as I said, INFAIR is a national study, and the main event was the main one. The 2014 event was organized in Turin, so only the Turin participants were directly invited, and there were, there was, I think I would say, like 50 participants from the participant of the study, the mothers, the family of the INFAIR family. I have this data, but I have to check the exact number.
All right, thank you very much, Constanza.
Thank you
for this presentation and answering all the questions. And I give the floor again to Isabel so that she can present our new speaker, our next speaker.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much, Constanza, for a very interesting presentation and for being such a good sport and doing your presentation before the planned time.
No problem at all.
So our next speaker is now here. And I'm very pleased to welcome Lin Malloy, who is Chief Operating Officer of the Avon Longitudinal Study of Parents and Children, also known as Alsbach. And we are very curious to hear you, Lynn, and very pleased to have you on board. So please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and apologies, I'm so sorry, I got my timings wrong, so really sorry about that. And thanks to the first speaker for stepping in. I'm just going to share my screen now. Can everybody see that?
Yes, we can.
You can, okay. Lovely. Okie doke. So yes, my name is Lin Malloy and I'm the Chief Operating Officer of Alsbach, which is also known as Children of the 90s. So that's the name that the participants know us as. So what I'm going to talk about today, I'm just going to do a very brief description of the study, talk about participant engagement in cohort studies generally, and then specifically focus on participant engagement in Alsbach across our different generations involved in the study. And then I'm going to end by talking about COVID-19 and also just talk a little bit about our engagement efforts in our big new data collection clinic that we've just started. And then I'll end with a summary. So the UK has got a very long history of running birth cohort studies, so starting from the 1930s all the way through to the present time. So roughly every 10 to 12 years, there's been a brand new birth cohort that's been established in the UK. And the book that's referenced here by Helen Pearson is a really excellent summary of the issues and problems about running these types of studies over the last few decades. So specifically now coming on to Alsbach. So Alsbach stands for the Avon Longitudinal Study of Parents and Children. It's a birth cohort study which started in Bristol in the UK, and you can see where that is on the map here. 14,500 pregnant women were recruited into the study in 1991 and 1992. And for the last 30 years, we've been following the original children, their mothers and fathers, and more recently, we've extended recruitment to the children of the children. So Alsbach is primarily a biomedical study, and we consider the sort of face-to-face the gold standard of data collection for us is face-to-face data and sample collection, although we do collect data in other ways as well. There's a couple of references to our cohort profiles on our G1 and G0 cohorts, and I'll come on to explain those in a moment. So Alsbach is a family study now. The three boxes here in red are the three main cohorts. So this is where we collect the cohort from which we collect most data. Starting in the middle with our Alsbach G1, generation 1. So these are the original children born into the study. And above them, you can see the mothers, which we call G0. So 14,500 of those women recruited into the study. And then we also have this growing cohort, our Alsbach G0 cohort, and we have just over 1,500 children recruited into the study. We do have these other cohorts, but we have not been funded to collect as much data and samples, unfortunately, on these other cohorts. So this is a very busy slide. Apologies for that. I'm just going to whiz through this fairly quickly. So we have around 30,000 participants who we're in contact with, lots of biosamples, 1.2 million biosamples, and we have over 80,000 variables available for researchers to access. So we've got 30 years of a very kind of in-depth, deep longitudinal study, and we have around 1,000 researchers who have used our data and samples in the past. We've produced about 2,500 papers, and we have around 18 proposals per month for researchers to access our data or samples. I won't say very much more on this slide. There's quite a nice diagram there just showing the depth of the information that we've asked, or sort of snapshot, if you like, of the information that we've asked our participants over the years. Okay, so I just wanted to kind of acknowledge, and I'm sure everybody is aware of this, that there's been a decline in response rates for these type of studies, for longitudinal cohort studies, everywhere over the last 20 years. So this slide is showing some studies worldwide, and this one is studies in the UK. And you can see that there's been a general, on the whole, a decline in the numbers of participants taking part in these studies over time. So coming on now specifically to participant engagement. So I think it's possible to see participant engagement as a continuum, if you like. So on the left-hand side, we have the kind of softer type of engagement. So this would involve things like sending out letters and newsletters to participants, having a study website, posting out on social media, perhaps doing social events and lectures to participants, and then moving on to the right hand side. And this is now where we're getting participants more involved with the study. So this is where we might have a participant advisory group set up, for example, where we consult with participants regularly, where we do different aspects of patient and public involvement, where we might do citizen science, and then finally where participants are co-designing the study with us. Alsbach sits about here, I would say, and I'll come on to explain what we do in a bit more detail now. So with our G0 mothers, and I've put and fathers there, but actually much of the focus has been on the mothers. So certainly our funding in the early days was all about the mother and child, and we managed to cobble together a little bit of funding to collect some data on fathers, but not nearly as much, unfortunately. Although in 2012 we were lucky to get funding, and we did run a clinical assessment on 2,500 of our fathers as well. But really much of the data is on the mothers and the children. So very early on in 1991 and 92, our very early recruitment was really via local National Health Service maternity services. And we're lucky in that we're a regional birth cohort study, so we were able to work very closely with local hospitals and trusts and really engage the staff working there to get them excited and encourage them to talk about the study with the patients coming in. We also worked a lot with charities and local media as well. Like lots of other studies, we've always produced newsletters very regularly where we report back on research findings and changes that are taking place within the study. And much of our early engagement focused around Jean Golding, who set up Alsbach and is very much in those early days was a figurehead of the study, and in fact is still very active now with the study too. We've always made very good use of local media, and we fostered relationships with the local media over time. We've, in the early days, we ran events with the mothers and the children and continue to foster links with the NHS services as the children were growing up. So if I had to kind of really describe our engagement methods, I would say for us, it's always about the personal touch. So, for example, we've always sent birthday cards to our participants, and we've asked them to, for example, we collected milk teeth when the babies were very little, and the children wrote us letters, or wrote the tooth fairy letters, which was very sweet, actually. And also we received sort of little things from participants over the years as well. So now coming on to the G1 original children, who now are aged around 30. So we saw them very regularly during their childhood, and they were very used to coming to the clinic. And in fact, I've heard lots of times people saying that they just thought everyone was in a study and that everyone came to the clinic, which is sweet. And we also gave them small gifts as well when they were here. And for some reason, which I never really have understood, they were very attached to our yellow stretchy man, and even talk about it today for some reason. The children got a day off school to attend the clinic, which they remember fondly. And we, in those early days, developed a very close relationship with local primary schools. So again, because we were a regional study, we had about, in some schools, local schools, about 80% of the class was in the study, which actually made it very easy to engage with them. And we also employed a full-time schools liaison officer up until they were 16 as well. And we continue to run events and parties for children over the years as well. So this very tricky stage, the transition to adulthood, was something that we were very concerned about because we knew that attrition tended to rise, and lots of teenagers drop out of cohort studies at this time. So we had a really big engagement campaign when the participants were aged 18, and this was all about them being consenting to take part in the study in their own right. We changed the participant facing materials and made them much more relevant to 18-year-olds and focused very much on what we knew were concerns for them. So, for example, things like leaving home, mental health. But what we interestingly found is that while some people were very keen to switch over and very able to do that, quite a lot of others weren't, and we had to take it very slowly, probably over a couple of years, and get them used to the idea of actually taking part in the study in their own right. We also we've always had this message in our study, which is that we recognise that participants are busy and they have lots of other things going on in their life, particularly around the age of 18. So the message that we give is that they can do as much or as little as they like with the study. They can take a break, and we will always welcome them back. And that's actually stood us in very good stead over the years. So this is our response rate. So like with other studies, there has been a decline over time, although we found over the last few years that the response rate has actually stabilised. And we have around 6,000 of our G1s who regularly take part in new data collection exercises, and around 7,000 of the G0 mothers and fathers can be relied on to take part in new data collection as well. And we hope that by 2024, we're going to have 3,000 children of the children in the study as well. So that's the growing part of the cohort. So just a couple of words on our G2 cohort. So these are children of the children. We started being aware of pregnancies from the age of 15, and we piloted this study in 2012. We weren't sure how successful it was going to be. So we did a pilot which lasted actually a couple of years, and we recruited new participants into the study. So this was partners of the original G1 participant and their children as well. It actually proved to be a very successful pilot and is now fully funded and a routine part of the study. And we hope that we'll continue to recruit the children of the children into the study from now on. So the engagement campaign for this G2 cohort, again, really centred around our local National Health Service maternity services. And we kind of almost went back to what we had done, 20 years beforehand, and really kind of engaged with midwives and health visitors. And we continue to do that now. We also found, interestingly, that this was a time that lots of our female G1 participants came back to the study. And we heard time and time again that participants kind of really finally understood what the study was about while they were pregnant themselves. And we found that this was a really, really great way to engage with them again. So as I mentioned, we've got over 1,500 children in this study, and we expect that to increase to 3,000 by 2024. We also have participant facing information suitable for children at different ages, because obviously there's children being born into this cohort all the time. So we have a whole series of different information available for different ages. And we also have assent, so our field workers take assent from the child from the age of 9 as well. This is the time points that we see our children. I won't focus on this, but you can see that we see them quite regularly up to the age of 11, and we hope beyond this as well. So coming on to our engagement methods. So what do we do? So the first thing I would say is that we're lucky enough to be funded to have a dedicated communication and engagement team. So we have 6 people and just under 5 FTE, people who cover all of our communication and engagement work. On the softer end of the engagement continuum, we send out regular newsletters. We do 1 annual hard copy, but much more regular e-newsletters when we've got something new to say. So that's probably more like a sort of quarterly e-newsletter. We're all over social media. We make use of Instagram in particular, but also Twitter and Facebook. And researcher videos are increasingly popular. So we tend to do very short researcher videos, feeding back some of the findings from the study. And again, we make a lot of use of local media, but also national radio and TV and publications with academics and participants' involvement in both of those. So here you can see a selection of the different media pieces that we've done. And here's another one. We recently celebrated our 30th anniversary. So we managed to get over a lot of UK-based broadcast media, and also in some of the kind of national. So The Guardian ran a couple of pieces for us as well.
2 more minutes, please, Lynn. Thanks.
Sorry, was it
2 more minutes? Yeah, 2 more minutes. Thanks.
Sorry, how long? 2 minutes?
Two.
Okay, so we also have a team of study ambassadors. We do qualitative research as well on participant experiences, and we run workshops and focus groups with participants as well. I'm speeding up now. We have a participant advisory panel, which are just amazing. Started when they were 15, and it's evolved and matured over time, but they're a very important part of what we do, and we run lots of our decisions by them. We also have our own internal ethics committee, so as well as lawyers, ethicists and academics, 50% are made up of study participants, and we meet with them beforehand to make sure that participants are fully up to speed, they understand the issues, so they are able to contribute fully to discussions. This has been brilliant, proved to be a really excellent thing to do, because participants ask questions that academics don't ask, and we found that it's really improved how that group functions. We also run a series of events. I won't go into detail because I'm running out of time, but we still do that. COVID, we have found we've been incredibly busy, like lots of other studies. We've done lots of new COVID research, and we found that this has re-energized participants. We've had 1,200 participants who've returned to the study, citing COVID and mental health as the reasons why they've come back, and we've incorporated it into our messaging. We've just started a new At 30 clinic, which is a multi-generation clinic, so families can attend together. It's about a 3 to 4 hour clinic. We do incentives, we pay participants £10 an hour, and we also have a reconnecting fee. So this is for people who have come back to the study after 5 years. So we pay them what we call a reconnecting fee, and we also have a bring a friend scheme where a participant will get £10 for each person they bring back into the study. We're lucky that we have a clinical research network, which is very active in Bristol, and they work very closely with us to help with recruitment. So they've just funded us to send out, or GPs, to send out texts on our behalf, encouraging attendance at the clinic. And we also have a disengage strategy where we're looking at different ways that we might be able to make contact with people who are less engaged with the study. So in summary, we have a different approach, which is different across the generations, and we found that you need to change that according to their age. We've got a tried and tested approach of various things, you know, things like targeted message for different generations, and involving participants as much as we're able to, and that's kind of proved to be very good for the study, and something we definitely want to continue doing. And then I just wanted to end and say, for me, one of the important things is this last bit about making it easy for participants to take part. So, you know, if they want to have a break for a couple of years, that's fine, absolutely fine. We'll keep in touch with them and welcome them back whenever they feel able to do that. Sorry, that's the end. There's a bit of a rush at the end, I'm afraid.
Thank you very much, Lynn. See, we have a lot of questions for you, so I'm sure that some of them will be left for the Q&A, longer Q&A session afterwards. One of the questions is, when collaborating with the media, did you ever experience any difficulties?
So I'd say we've developed a really good relationship with the media now because we know them very well. But yes, there can be tensions there because the media want a story, they want it to be exciting, and sometimes the story just isn't exciting. It's just not there. And also they tend to want something new every time. So each media outlet wants something new. And again, that can be quite difficult to manage. So yes, you've got to do it carefully, and I'm very pleased that our communications manager is a very experienced media person who knows the local media very well.
Yeah. And another question about difficulties. Did you experience any difficulties when you were collaborating with schools?
No. I mean, we haven't done it this time round, although we are now starting to think about it. But I think because Alsbach was so embedded within the Bristol community, and we put a lot of time and effort into making sure that people knew about the study, I don't think we did actually have particular problems with the schools. I think they were, I mean, this was, 30 years ago, 20, 30 years ago, but our experience was they were really pleased to be involved and excited about it. I think it also helped that we were lucky enough to have a full-time schools liaison officer who's an ex-teacher who had taught in Bristol, so knew everybody. So I think that kind of made it easier, perhaps, than it might have been.
We have time for one more question. Do you use different strategies to engage with Generation 0 and Generation 1?
Yes.
And are they different in how they engage with you as well?
Sorry, I didn't catch that last one.
Are they behaving differently when they
Yes.
engage with you?
Yeah, completely differently. So G1 is all about email and social media. So we tend to make contact with them over Instagram. They don't even like Facebook, hate Facebook. It's all about Instagram. And with our G0, at one point we tried to stop doing the hard copy newsletter. And we had lots of complaints, and the older generation said that they really liked to have the hard copy of it. So absolutely, everything's different. You almost need to have a completely different take on it, I would say, with the different generations. And then again, with our children, with our G2 cohort, absolutely, you need to do things different again. Probably using TikTok, actually, rather than Instagram.
Yeah, thank you, Lynn, for this very interesting presentation. We still have some more questions, but let's save them for later. And now Isabel will present our next speaker.
Yes, and thank you so much, Lynn. We have so much to learn from Alsbach. So our next and last presentation for today is from Amna Rahman, who is Research Fellow, and Shahid Islam, who is also Senior Research Fellow at Born in Bradford. Very pleased to see you both. I think you are in the same room, if I understood you correctly. So very nice to see you. And please, the floor is yours.
We are in the same room, so sharing the same laptop. Thank you for inviting us. We'll just start with the screen share and this one. Sorry, we're just trying to get the presentation up on the screen. Please. Bear with us.
Well, whilst you do that, shall I just do your camera? Yeah. Can people see that?
No,
Not yet. Okay.
not yet.
We will do another.
Whilst Sanders just trying to get that going, I'll just start so we can get rid of this. We can get rid of this silence. So thank you very much for inviting us, and it's really nice to hear about some of the work going on internationally and even within the UK. Alsbach and colleagues who we're regularly in touch with and cross base with. So I'm Shahid Islam, Senior Research Fellow with ACT Early, have been born in Bradford for a number of years, and Amna Raymond, who's my colleague, has also been the same. And normally we would start, normally you'd find us in community venues of various descriptions, in community centres, in places of worship, in neighbourhoods, talking about the virtues and values of longitudinal birth cohort studies. But as you can imagine, most people, as soon as you say words like longitudinal birth cohort studies, if they're not in research, they're just going to be thinking, what's that? So we do our level best to share information in a way which is both interesting and educating to our communities. And so that's the importance of community engagement. And I think it's really crucial that we constantly keep in the back of mind why engaging our communities about the work that we do is always at the forefront of our mind. Sometimes I use a little bit of a metaphor to describe community engagement and the value of it. And I say it's a bit like zero in arithmetic. It might not have much value in itself immediately, but it certainly adds to the value of everything else, because anybody who is engaged is then aware of what other researchers are doing and is more likely to pay an interest and attention to what research will be planning and doing. So that's the crucial nature of it. And it's not just because it's a nice thing to do in a democratic and egalitarian sense. There's a lot of evidence that we now see and recite and share, which shows that when communities are engaged, it certainly improves research processes and programs in a way which would not be the case had you not engaged your communities. So there's a lot of evidence for that. I mean, one I'll just cite, and I let you find others, but Omara Eves et al. In 2013 carried out a systematic review and meta-analysis in which they looked at 151 studies, which looked at the value. It started raining really heavily in Bradford, by the way. That's just come out of nowhere. And they looked at 151 studies, and they found, majority of them found that overall public health interventions for disadvantaged groups, this is what we're going to focus on, disadvantaged groups using community engagement strategies that are effective in terms of both health behaviours, health consequences, and also on top of that, participant self-efficacy and perceived social support. They also found that these findings appear to be robust and not due to systematic methodological biases. So in other words, there's a lot of evidence that community engagement is not just a nice democratic and egalitarian thing, it's actually grounded in really good evidence. So we're gonna talk a little bit about our approaches and share with you some of our learning and some of how we go about engaging with our communities. So for that, me and Amna are going to do a bit of a double act. So this is going to be interesting. So do you want to skip on to the next slide, and I'll let you take over and then let me know when it's my turn again. If you want, yeah.
So the Born in Bradford cohort was set up in 2007, and we did the bulk of the recruitment from 2007 to 2011. Basically, it was sort of set up as a result of some concerns by some medics, academics, and other professionals who had some, who were alarmed by some of the statistics around child health and well-being in the city. So we recruited to that initial study for the first years, and those children are now, the oldest one of those are over 14. We have subsequently set up other cohort studies, which we'll talk about later, but that's the original one. And we think, well, we believe that we've developed a good relationship with our communities. and that's probably part of the reason why some of the engagement that we do is successful. The city of Bradford itself, the metropolitan district of Bradford is classed as the 6th largest in the UK, but our recruitment has only been in the actual city of Bradford simply because one of the criteria for the recruitment was that the children had to be born at the local hospital, the Bradford Royal Infirmary. So most of the participants are actually people who live within the main city of Bradford. And there are other hospitals that serve the rest of the district. But as a whole, in terms of the health of the city, we still experience about 70% more higher rates of infant illness. 60% of children are still born in the poorest 20% of the population, and we do have a birth cohort set in those areas now just to serve those communities. And 20% of the population of Bradford is South Asian origin. So that, in terms of demographics, leads us on to just a breakdown of the communities that are in the cohort. I mean, the UK, like Lynn's just explained earlier on, we're probably one of the newest studies around, but the difference between our study and the others is the demographics. It's a very multi-ethnic cohort, very rich and diverse, and lots of different participation from communities. But we have two very distinct groups within our cohort of white British mothers and mothers of Pakistani origin. And interestingly, within the Pakistani origin mothers, there's again a bit of a split in terms of the mothers who were born in the UK and mothers who were born outside of the UK, mainly in Pakistan. We do have a smaller percentage that were born in other countries. So this data gives us lots of different things that we can compare and contrast between ethnicities of children. And we've done lots of research around that. But I mean, we can talk about it later, but I think we need to move on to the next slide so that Shahid can pick it up.
Sorry for racing it along a little bit. It's just the nature of when you present it. We're so fascinated by trying to share everything. We'll have to be very selective. But one of the things that we have got since the Born in Bradford cohort is, so as Amanda says, the families were recruited between 2007 and 2011. After that time period, many Eastern European families, especially from Slovakia and Hungary, Roma families, have moved into the inner city of Bradford. And so we have a new birth cohort called Born in Bradford Better Start. And in that cohort, we've also got quite a lot of families who are from Central and Eastern Europe, particularly from Roma communities. Which makes it an interesting thing for us to compare how different communities are faring for health reasons. But anyway, there's a little bit of a contentious issue that I just want to sort of drop into this, which is about community engagement. And we've sort of focused quite a lot of our energies into what do we mean by community engagement, because people use that those words and mean very different things. So this is just a quote taken from the paper that I mentioned earlier by Omara Eves, which describes community engagement as involving communities in decision-making and in planning, design, governance, and I won't read the rest of it. But we've sort of grappled with these issues to think, is that what community engagement means? Because what we've found is most of what we do when we share information with our communities, that's community engagement, whether it's science festivals or whether it's Twitter feeds or Facebook notifications or sending birthday cards out. And involvement is much more advanced than simply engagement. But just before I get to involvement, I just want to mention something about participation. Participation is when somebody is recruited to a study and they may not have any involvement whatsoever other than just taking part in the study as a recipient of our services, or somebody who completes a survey, or somebody who takes part in a focus group. That's how we're defining participant. Engagement is simply receiving information, and involvement is where people get to a point where they can influence what we're doing. So we've written a paper about this to try and untangle the various definitions that we all apply in the world of applied health research and also in general research, to say, well, these three things mean different things, and we sometimes conflate them. But if I can just roll on to the next slide, if that's possible. Yeah, that's the one. The key thing for us is the NICE guidelines. Whenever we're thinking about involving our communities, we think, how is it that we can get our communities to influence what we're doing? Because that's the key thing. There's one thing that's sharing information, and then there's another thing that's asking people to complete surveys or take part in focus groups and interviews and that kind of thing. But how do we get communities to influence what we're doing? And so the strapline of NICE guidelines, no decision about me without me, is something that it's actually not a new thing. It came about in Cameron's Big Society, and it came about even before that in a publication which I can't remember right now. But we've looked at. Do you want to skip the next slide? And then get to the ladder one, if that's okay. So we've looked at various ladders of participation, and I'm fairly sure most people on this call will be familiar with the different ladders of participation. And we've looked at where are we currently and where do we want to be. So let's just focus on the middle ladder, the Wilcox 1994 ladder of participation, for ease of kind of simple, fewest number of rungs on the ladder. And the first rung is giving information out. That's seen as a form of participation. If you give people some information about what is happening, that's considered effectively a form of participation. The next one is consultation, asking people what do they think and then giving their opinion. Whether you act on that or not, it's still a form of participation because you have asked people. If you don't act on it, then some would argue, well, that's tokenism, but we won't get into that. Then the next stage is deciding together. And that's the stage that we've been starting thinking about. What can we be doing to make people interested in the work that we're doing? And how can we make it interesting enough for people to sort of pay attention to the kinds of things that we find so they can influence, policy, they can influence systems, they can influence organizations. So we can do things differently, because there's no point in finding loads of interesting things about health inequalities and why certain children do well and others do not do so well, if you don't actually do something with it, is my opinion. And I think that's the key thing. How do we get our communities interested enough to find out what we're doing so they can shape policy and help us decide what needs to be done? And then the stage up from that is not only deciding together, but acting together. So how can we get our communities interested enough to sort of support us with doing something about what it is that we've found, which might make a difference, whether it's reducing obesity, whether it's improving air quality, whether it's reducing problems with, children not having the appropriate level of language and communication skills, and the kinds of things that we find. And then if we get it to a point where people are interested enough, then it's not just going to be a case of acting together. It will be organizations, the voluntary sector, faith organizations, schools and others who'll be wanting to support the work that we do. And that's the kind of journey that we want to get towards. So we're going to now share some of the journey that Amna's been on and I've been on, and some of our colleagues in Born in Bradford and Act Early have been on, which shares, how we've gone about and engaged our community. And I'll come back to some of the changes that we're hoping to sort of build on based on the ladders.
Okay. Yeah. So community engagement is it's a vital part, almost a core part of any research project that we're doing. So we've kind of instilled that in all our researchers on the work that we do. We've got an aim that we value the importance of it. So we value people's co-opinion. We listen to their current concerns, ideas, and we're keen not just to publish articles, etc., but we really want to get our research back out into the communities that we're serving, and also influence policy change, etc., in the city. So we have an engagement policy, and we try and when we have new bids for funding, etc., we do refer to it just to see how we can get our communities involved. The engagement that we have is sort of on a two-tier level. Firstly, we've got our birth cohort families, and similar to Alsbach, every child in the cohort receives a birthday card. We also organise 5 photo shoots per year, which are aimed at the twins. We have about 137 sets of twins in the cohort, 3 sets of triplets, and all the babies that are born sort of Christmas and New Year periods. And all these photographs are of the children in the cohort. We use these photographs on the birthday cards and any sort of publicity that we do. In terms of campaigns, we try and get involved as much as we can, which that's relevant nationally and locally. So we've just got a couple of examples of something that we've done in the past, like the National Eye Health Week 2017. Subsequently, after that, we have had a study around glasses in classes, and it's been children have been given 2 pairs of glasses, those that need them, one to keep in the classroom and one to take home, so that they're never without glasses in the classroom, because it did find that it affected their learning. But the other ways that we engage in, obviously, things like social media. We have a couple of Twitter accounts, one aimed at professionals and one aimed at parents. We've got Facebook account, we've got Instagram, and we're now sort of, we do lots of videos on YouTube, and we're trying to sort of move more towards child-friendly sort of media platforms, such as Snapchat, etc. But we don't actually have a dedicated team of people doing the social media, etc. But it's just sort of picked up by various people. We've got one main person, but a lot of people get involved in it. But we do utilize we're part of Bradford Teaching Hospitals Trust, and they have a central media team. So we try and utilize them for press releases, etc. But so that's our, and then we also have a web page which is full of information about the research, new studies that are going on, information on the researchers themselves. So that's available for everybody to see. But we do have lots of, these are just how we use our social media to sort of celebrate, share ideas, ask opinions, share news, blogs, etc. We are fortunate that we've also been followed by local and national media, and BBC Radio 4 have followed us right from the start, and they do a yearly programme on our work, which follows the families that we're working with. So that could be to do anything that we've done in the past or stuff that we're doing at the moment.
2 more minutes, please. You have 2 more minutes. Thank you.
Okay. We have a lot of lay participation groups. So we have our parent governors who are parents of the original cohort. We have a community research action group. We have volunteer roles for parents, but we also have the young ambassadors who are the oldest children in the cohort. So we utilize those platforms. But being a city like Bradford, we know the traditional methods don't work. So we try and engage families differently. We try and attend events, festivals out in the community where we find local people. But we also try and use local media, which is alternative media in other languages. Say, for example, Radio Ramadan, which is broadcast in Urdu every year. And we make sure that we have a presence on there so that our communities know about the work that we're doing. And collaborations, partnerships, we have lots with local universities, colleges, we offer internships, etc., just so that we're building the workforce of the future, and this is a good way of getting them involved. So I've just skipped that, and I'm going to pass it back to Shahid to just talk about the new directions that we're taking.
Yeah, sorry, I'm going to try not to trespass on anybody else's time. It's just one of those things. We've got loads to share, but one of the things that we have found is we can actually do research about communities using community-based research methods. So just by way of one example, we've done a study on community readiness, which essentially, I'll just briefly describe it. I'll send the paper to anybody who's interested. We looked at the new Eastern European Roma community, which is now residing in the heartland of Bradford, the inner city areas, to understand their level of readiness to take up nutrition and obesity interventions, because that was one of the things that our birth cohort studies were showing, that there's a problem going on here. So somebody decided, well, actually, let's target some interventions which will deal with this problem. So we carried out a community readiness assessment, which is a rigorous and robust methodology, which was devised in the 70s in US. And we found that the community wasn't ready. So it wasn't just simply a case of here's what we found and therefore this is the solution. If you actually go and do some research using community-oriented tools, you can actually find what might work better than what you're planning. And we're now doing things like appreciative inquiry and asset-based community development to understand, what is it, instead of thinking about the deficits in our community, how about we think about some of the assets and how we can build on that to strengthen people's health and well-being and social welfare. But sorry, we have probably trespassed on people's times, so we can just go to the, we'll just end it there. Okay.
Thank you. Stop sharing as well.
Thank you. We have time now for Q&A, so then you can expand a little bit, elaborate a little bit more on some of the things that you left out. So we have now some discussion time until the end of the session. First, there is a dedicated Q&A for you, for Born in Bradford, and we have already some questions for you, and then we will open the floor for more other kinds of questions and old questions that weren't answered. One of the first questions for you for Born in Bradford is, have you evaluated the impact of having advisory groups? For example, have you asked the participants about it?
The advisory groups, is that what you?
Yeah.
Is that what you no, not officially and not formally. And it is something that we have found a tool, and I can't remember what it stands for, but it's PPEET, and it originates from Canada. And essentially, it asks the researchers, it asks the members of the public, and it also asks the organisations which are responding to the community engagement, how they felt that they engaged different people. And we were thoroughly considering doing that, and then COVID came along, and it sidetracked us from everything else, and we ended up doing lots of research about COVID. And it was something that we have planned to do and will do in the future.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Another question is, how are the events financed? Financed.
Okay. Well, when we used to run our own events, they were financed through our own budgets, but now we tend to link in with the other events that are happening in the city. Bradford has a very sort of vibrant and supportive community and voluntary sector. So we know our youngsters are getting a little bit old for the sort of things like we organise like teddy bears, picnics, birthday parties, but they will attend events that are out in the community. So that's what we try and link into.
Another question is about the ambassadors. Can you elaborate a little bit on the parent champions or ambassadors' role? How do you select or recruit them, and what are their roles?
Okay, well, the young ambassadors are the oldest children in the cohort. So as they're coming, as they're passing 10 years old, we're approaching them and asking them if they want to take part in this advisory panel. The idea is that we build them up to become just a lay participation group, just like the adult ones. The parent champions role is a volunteer role, and it's there's a recruitment process for that, and they would accompany me out to community events, for example. And the idea is that coming from a parent's point of view and somebody who's taking part in the research, sometimes they can have that little bit of a niche and an edge to speak to communities compared to professionals. So it's like a support role, but it is there to build their confidence and skills as well. So it's not just a one-way process. We do try and give back to all our participation groups, so that we're trying to build confidence with skills, public speaking, etc., that they may not otherwise be able to gain in their normal life.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for your answers. Now we will start with a little bit more open discussion. So I also encourage the speakers to ask questions to each other. You can use your voices, or you can also put things on the chat and then we read them out loud. So you can also interact with each other. I have a few questions that were not answered, but I also please encourage you to to interact with each other, and also the rest of the audience. I also encourage you to continue using the chat box to write your questions. One other question that I have for Alsbach is also about the role of the ambassadors. So can you explain to us a little bit more about that?
Yes, so if I'm completely honest, I would say it hasn't gone as well as we'd expected with the study ambassadors. It tends to be quite a group that kind of dip in and out, really, for us, but they are still incredibly useful. So we put about 5 years ago, maybe, we put a call out asking for participants to contact us if they were interested in taking on this role of a study ambassador. And the way that we put it to them is that they would work with us, particularly around social media, to repost messages that we sent out, or to try and get a discussion going amongst their peer group in a way that we felt that we weren't able to. That actually hasn't worked very well, but what has worked very well with our study ambassadors is doing media interviews. So, you know, the media always want participants to film alongside academics, and we have a team of 20 or so study ambassadors who now are quite experienced in talking to the media, and so we tend to use them for that. Some of them work in the media already, which is brilliant for us because they can also help us. So that's kind of how we use them. As I say, you know, we had great plans for this group, but it hasn't quite worked out in the way that we wanted it to, but still a useful group.
Monica, you're muted.
I know. I couldn't find the buttons. They were hidden. I have a question for Ninfea. Are you planning for a digital-only strategy with the children when they become adults, or do you plan on trying something different with them, like home visits, or
no,
go beyond the digital?
No, I think we will stick with the online version only. Actually, this issue of how addressing the children now that they become young adults and no longer children is quite crucial to us. But for what concerns the type of study design, I think we will, at the moment, we are not thinking of going, face-to-face or direct contact. No, yeah.
Okay, thank you. There's a question for all of you, so feel free to just answer it however you consider. Are you considering incentives to motivate children when they become adults to continue participating in the studies?
So I'm happy to kick off. So yes, Alsbach has always used incentives, and certainly when our participants became 18, yes, absolutely, we did, and we did quite a bit of work. We talked to participants and used our participant advisory group and asked them what the best incentives were. We've also done a lot of our own work in this area as well, and everybody knows this already, but there's kind of two basic forms of incentives. One is altruism, you know, and so giving back research findings. That's a really important part of why people take part in this study. But also monetary incentives work incredibly well, whether we like it or not, they do. And also feedback on findings as well works really, really well. So we weren't able to use all of those, but yes, and for me, you know, that transition in cohort studies is a really difficult time, and I think you've got to use everything that you possibly can to try and keep the participants involved. So I personally feel that incentives actually work really well, but you've got to get the balance right, because some people can get quite offended, you know, and I've heard participants say, why are you offering me money? I don't do it for money, I do it because I enjoy taking part in it. So you've got to get the wording right and the messaging right around that.
Is it okay if we go next? We offer our adult participants money for taking part in the research, but the children, we've not really done that with them as such. I mean, we've got other things like T-shirts, etc., that we give to them, so that when they're out in the community with us, they're wearing those T-shirts to show that they are an ambassador. But so far, I mean, our children are only, the oldest ones are only 14 at the moment. So, but maybe in the coming years, we do have a big new project on mental health, adolescents and young people's mental health, which is about to start in September. And we'll be recruiting to that study. So we probably will have incentives with that, but at the moment we don't.
For what concerns the NINFER study, we are still thinking about it. Either we do something similar to the NINFER teen website, which is obviously, which is not going to be appropriate, although for young adults, or but we are still in the process of deciding how best approach them. But yeah, either a dedicated website, or maybe we were thinking maybe something with a mobile is more direct then, but we're still in the process of really thinking about it, not yet in that stage.
There is a question about the use of social media for all of you. So you all use social networks. Did you evaluate the impact of social networks on participant engagement? And also, have social networks created different kinds of participant communities and facilitated exchange between participants? They say researchers in social sciences are afraid that these exchanges between participants could bias the response of the participant. What do you think about this? Is something that concerns you?
Yes, so your first point was about social media. So we do use social media quite a lot, and we've got quite a lot of our academics who sort of pinpoint some of the key things that they're involved in. So people are constantly aware from Facebook and Twitter about the work that we're involved in, and the kinds of things, the kinds of research studies that we're trying to recruit people to. I'm not 100% sure I can say that I understand the relationship between researchers and social science field, thinking that there's a possibility of causing bias by creating social networks. If anything, my view has been, and still is, that when we've got, often what we find is the research that we're involved in, most people out there are not going to read it. Unless you're already in academia, the chances of you being interested in it as a general member of the public is very low. So we're hugely dependent on turning that information into something useful and meaningful and easy to absorb, and sending it to the social networks that we've got where people are already going. And I think that's what has been some of the success story behind some of the projects that we've got, which is why we've been able to, for example, get people recruited to focus groups and to interviews after we've shared the story of some of our research. By way of one example, when we shared the story of how living in a highly polluted air pollution area, from car pollution in particular, how that impacts on birth weight, and then how that impacts on adult health outcomes after the age of 30. By sharing that as a simple story, we've got a lot more people completing our current survey, which is asking people in all of Bradford, what do they think about the proposals for the clean air zone, which is going to come into force in January next year. And that's because of the social networks that we've connected to share the story about our findings through the research. And I think that is a reciprocal thing that we always need. We need the social networks so we can keep our research alive and well informed for the members of our public. I hope that wasn't too waffly an answer, but yeah, my view would be it's not causing a problem of bias.
Yeah, I kind of agree. I mean, we haven't done any formal evaluation. From our point of view, it's more of a kind of practical way. I completely agree that participants don't read what you send them. You know, they don't really read newsletters. They might skim them very quickly. They might glance at an email. So, you know, you've got to communicate with them in a way that makes sense to them and something that they'll look at. And when you're dealing with 30-year-olds, that they will only look at oftentimes social media. They won't look at anything else. So for us, it's just, what's the best way that we can communicate with you? And they tell us time and time and time again that that's how we do it. But we haven't done any formal evaluation of it. And the point about, I can understand the point about bias, but we have got no evidence at all. We should be so lucky that participants decide to have a conversation amongst themselves. I just don't think that happens. I just think they go, yeah, you've got another clinic coming. Oh, you want me to do a questionnaire? Right, bang, yes, I'll do it. And I think that's it. And they get on with the rest of their lives. I just don't think that there's a community in that way. It would be fantastic if it was. It would be brilliant for us, but I just don't think it happens in that way.
I agree. That would be a hope that they that they talk about the questionnaires. I don't think this is the function of the social network. It's more a channel to create a community, and that's it. But, yeah. And I've seen Isabel's question. Now I'm already speaking about the considering the use of citizen science strategies and asking participants to collect data. We haven't done that. The only thing close to this kind of design approach is that we have done. We ask quite frequently ask our participants to suggest subjects they would like to see on the NinFair data section. So if they have a particular information or characteristics that they would like to see how their children is distributed compared with the other NinFair participant in terms of some characteristics, they can suggest us what they want to see in the data section, and if we can, we try to.
Yeah, I think we're quite similar in Alsbach as well, I would say. I mean, we have talked a lot about co-design over the years, but I think we feel that for a study like Alsbach, that we're not able to offer it in a way because it's primarily face-to-face data collection. It's quite complicated, and we tend to get experts who come in and would, for example, want to do a liver scan, and that's a very kind of specialist type of measure that we would, participants are unlikely to have an opinion on that. However, what we do and what we use our participant advisory panel for, which is brilliant and works really well, is if a researcher approaches us and wants to undertake a new study in Alsbach, they have to go in front of OCAP, our participant advisory panel. So the panel meets every 6 weeks, and they have to almost sell it to the participants, and the participants can ask them any questions that they want to, and they would then feed back to us and say, yes, it's acceptable. Yes, we think that this is okay. And that can be quite tricky sometimes, because we sometimes have to say no to researchers, and you have to do that. If you've got a participant advisory panel and they tell you something, you absolutely have to go with it. And if that's going to upset some eminent scientist who's a specialist in liver scans, then so be it. That's what you have to do. And that's kind of as far as we go down that kind of, and that's not really co-design, but that's certainly kind of participant involvement to an extent.
We're okay to have a stab at the question of citizen science, if that's okay. not least because it's something that we're really putting a strategy together for. So obviously, one of the things that we all hopefully agree on is that so far, by and large, health services and research about health services and health and well-being generally has been pretty much monopolized by academic researchers. You know, members of the public haven't really been able to collect data and publish it and then share what they value. Citizen science is an interesting way of sort of turning that and giving the opportunity to members of the public to say, okay, how about you collect data about those things that you value, and then not only collect that data, but turn it into something meaningful and work with academics to present it and say, these are the things that we want to see change. So we've got a strategy being developed at the moment to work out how can we make that possible, because there's a whole host of sort of behavioral science theories behind it, which I won't go into. But if we get members of the public interested in collecting data, sharing data, presenting data, there's evidence that shows that that has an impact on the health of that population and the city that it's about, much more than if you just collect it and then present it and ask them to change their behavior, because they're part of that data collection. They're very interested in seeing changes as a result of it. So we're looking at something called Survey 123, just as one tool. There's probably many out there, but this is one that members of the public can download onto their phone, take a photograph of, let's say, their local park or green space, and say something about whether they like that park or green space or whether they dislike it, and why do they dislike it? What is it about in that photograph? And we can collect in some sort of central portal somewhere those photographs and those comments and those audio snippets about what they like or dislike about those parks, whether it's dog fouling or quad bikes or rowdy teenagers or whatever. And then we can, working with those people who collected that data, present it to council officials, public health officials, and say, look, here's a reason why people do use, let's say, Roberts Park, but don't want to use Bowling Park. And here are the things that would make them want to use this park, because this is what we found in the data that they've collected, that they've analysed. And the idea is then that would lead to hopefully conversation and change in policy and funding. So we're trying to get onto that journey, because I think that's the evolution of engagement or involvement, and it's something that we're excited about.
And I think that's something that Bourne and Bradford do really, really well. And I think the fact that you work with local councils and you're much more engaged with policymakers, I would say, than Alsbach is. And I think that's brilliant that you're able to do that. Unfortunately, we're not, because we it's much more of an academic study, I would say, and we're reliant on funding from research councils and charities. And so we found that we have to be quite careful that we're not promising something that we can't deliver on with the participants. So if they, and we do ask them, what would you like us to collect in the future? They invariably say measures on mental health comes up time and time and time again. And actually, sometimes that can be quite difficult to get funded. So, we're just very conscious that we don't want to keep asking them the same thing and then just not being able to deliver on it. So I think it's fantastic that you're able to do that in Bourne and Bradford in a way that we're just not able to.
Yeah, and I suppose it's been part of the journey. So we obviously didn't get there from day dot. One of the books that you shared, Lynn, fantastic book. Anybody who hasn't read it should read it. Helen Pearson's The Life Project. And I think one of the quotes in there is, everybody knows where the birth cohort study or longitudinal study starts, but nobody knows where it's going. And that's the exciting thing. We kind of are on that trajectory, don't really know where we're going, but this is one of the things that we've found that members of our public are interested in. So we thought, okay, let's try and get this rolling, because it works for things like RSPB bird count, and citizen science works for lots of other things. So how about we try and make it work for health and well-being for our young people in particular? So yeah, we'll keep you posted of how it's going as well.
Constanza, I saw you nodding at some things that they were saying about also influencing policymakers and all that. Do you have anything to add about that?
No, I was nothing when Lynn was saying that it's hard to keep asking participants, suggesting stuff what if we cannot satisfy them. So it's the balance
COVID was a really I mean, obviously, COVID's terrible and everything, but, for cohort studies, I mean, it kind of really did re-energize a lot of the participants because it was very real. We were able to, so we did a couple of home antibody tests early on. We've done a bunch of questionnaires. We're bringing people in with long COVID for a deep phenotyping visit, all that kind of thing. And I think that was a very, it was very easy to then talk to policymakers about that because they were crying out for information. And in fact, we just kind of found that it bypassed years of trying to get to know people and all of that work that you have to do to get them interested, because they were almost kind of like banging on our door and saying, what are you doing? Tell us what you're doing, And so that was a kind of really neat way of doing it. But I suspect that will kind of die down and things will kind of get back to normal, hopefully, in a few months' time.
So I was just on mute and I started talking. I absolutely agree that COVID woke us up to all sorts of realities. And one of the things that it did do was, as soon as it struck, we put down our tools and says, okay, let's focus on how our communities are affected by COVID. And so Amna and I immediately, because of these going back to a bit of the social networking point, we contacted all the people who are really connected to their own neighborhoods, whether it's through the organizations that they work in or whether they're just volunteers in their area, and asked them, how are young people in particular affected in short term, medium term, and what do you think are the long-term impacts of this? And it's no surprise we found mental health, which is now coming out as a major problem. We found out that people were really going to struggle with their GCSEs and A-levels and all sorts of things. And that was, and through that work, we managed to sort of connect with our local authority and our hospitals trust to say, these are the things that people have already told us are going to be affecting people further down the chain. And lo and behold, there were those things. So we were ahead of the game. But the good thing was, by connecting with people about those things, we've still now got those strong relationships because we shared all that information. And for example, one of the things that we said, look, we've already found out that when the vaccines come out, a lot of the communities, especially in the poorer neighborhoods, are not going to be trusting what is in them. And so we need to start thinking about what can be done to build up some trust about this. Now, I'm not going to make a party political point, but the government didn't help with how they handled things. So a lot of people were saying, well, actually, we don't trust science and we don't trust politicians. So we had to sort of get, community leaders onto YouTube, onto videos, onto TikToks, and onto community events to say, look, these are all the things that you really need to know and make an informed decision. By doing all of that, do some other work, whether it's COVID or not, we can tap into that group and say, look, do you remember we did all that work to the uptake? How about we do some work about how do we deal with the problem of obesity and diabetes and heart problems and stroke and all of these sorts of things. So I think COVID really helped us sort of build that relationship. And it's a shame it took COVID to do that, but we should at least put the silver lining down that cloud, I think.
And I was in another meeting a little while ago and with lots of other UK-based studies, and everyone was talking about this kind of uptake and increase in response rates over COVID. I think all of the studies pretty much across the board saw the same thing, but actually now it's starting to decline again, and it's going back to, well, hopefully back to where it was and not dipping down even further than that. So I think it's something that we've just got to find a way to, that message about, why cohorts are important, and the message is that this only cohorts can do this, only we can look at the long-term consequences of something like that. We've got to get that messaging right and keep it going. I mean, we haven't seen a decrease in our response rate because we're working really, really hard, but I hope we don't. But, if we look at other studies, they definitely are, which is a shame. So we'll see.
sorry I speak so much, but I just want to add one more thing. I think one of the things, Lynn, why response rates are declining is because there are a lot more people sending out surveys. So there's a thing called consultation fatigue, isn't there, where people think, oh, I've filled out so many of these surveys, I better stop now. And I myself, guilty of that. You just think, not another one. Why can't all these people just talk to each other and collect the data together? And of course, in an ideal world, it would work like that, but it just doesn't. And I think that's one of the things about doing work with lots of partners, is to say, you know, how about we actually think about who needs what, and then find some sort of system to sort of share that information. It's another metaphor. If everybody, if Yorkshire Water dig outside your house one week, and then Yorkshire Electricity dig the week after, and Yorkshire British Gas dig the week after, you'll always have a hole dug. Whereas if they all just dug and did their work together, you know, it'd make it so much easier. And I think that's the strength of working in partnerships with lots of organizations and institutions. You can think, what are the relevant things and how can we work together to collect data about them, but also try and fix them?
And it's something that we've done for the COVID, alongside what Shahid and I were doing. We realised there were lots of providers, particularly organisations that worked at grassroots level with the public, were doing the same things. So we kind of got together with them and decided that rather than all individually do our own bit, we'll do it together, and then it was all being fed into the same sort of streams up towards councils and commissioners, etc. So that helped.
Yeah, to pick up this issue about the consultation fatigue, and also how many people that are involved in grassroots movements and community movements also suffer from burnout, because it's very exhausting. It was very interesting, born in Bradford, when you explained this difference between participation, engagement, and involvement. And involvement, of course, is something way more demanding, also more rewarding, because you are really involved in your community, but it is more demanding. So it can be a challenge also to really get people involved in that sense of acting together, because sometimes it's just easier to passively receive a little bit of information. So how do you see that active involvement really happening in your community?
Should we yeah, I think it was Costanza or Lynn who talked about the importance of sharing the value of why people get involved. And I think it was along the lines of people do it because they see something good happen as a result of their involvement. You know, when people give blood, they don't really know who's the beneficiary of that blood. They give it because they think, well, somebody's going to benefit. And, you know, blood gets divided up by white cells for cancers and red cells for leukemia, and, you know, white platelets for certain conditions. And I think what we've got to do is we've got to think about when we get our communities to be involved in deciding what sorts of research priorities we should have, how we should ask questions, what are the ethical issues, how we can improve sample sizes and response rates, how we can sort of disseminate our findings, how we can write up our findings, how we can make the message from our research useful to our communities. They feel that they're, in the same way as those people who give blood, they feel like they're doing something which is good for their community. And I think we don't get people involved in that conversation enough. What we do is we don't separate out engagement, participation, and involvement. We see it all as one big lump and everybody's thrown into it. But if we say to those who are involved, you know, your involvement is a bit like, I don't know, giving blood might be a bit extreme one here, but it's a bit like helping your community through giving something which is going to be beneficial to others. And yes, you can pay people for that because, you know, they're sat there, they've had to attend a meeting, they've had to read through a complicated ethical document, and then they've got to give some feedback and all of those kinds of things. Some people may not want money, but what we've got to do is we've got to continuously show what benefit there is for them. Now, recently, we've got a number of engagement groups. We've got CRAG, Community Research Advisory Group. We've got PRAG, which is about the air pollution advisory group. And somebody from our PRAG, just about 2 weeks ago, has joined our Born in Bradford study called BBMRI as a research fellow. So there's an opportunity that people will get more interested by taking part in these sorts of involvement opportunities. and then take a deep dive into the real world of academic research and become partners with us. So there are all sorts of benefits, which we don't, I think, I'm not just talking about monographs, I think research hasn't really shared the values with, and I think we need to do a lot more work around that.
I have one last comment that is particularly interesting to me about mental health. It was mentioned before that also it is an increasingly important topic that arises time after time, but there is also stigma around mental health, and you, Lynn, mentioned also some lack of funding when it comes to to receive funds for this kind of research. So how to get people involved, including funders, when there is this kind of reticence to engage with a problem that it is increasingly present in our societies?
I can start. I don't know, it's hard, isn't it? You've just got to keep trying, I guess. And, you know, there are ways that you can collect data on mental health that don't have to be that expensive. So, you know, we do a lot of remote data collection, which is certainly a lot cheaper than face-to-face. So we can often find ways to do it. But, you know, again, going back to that conversation we were having about COVID, I think, you know, suddenly COVID, I mean, because there is, you know, people really are, as we know from all of the evidence that's shown, you know, people are really struggling with their mental health. And I think, you know, the funders have kind of sat up and taken notice of that. And we're certainly finding it easier to have those conversations with the funders now. So, you know, when an opportunity arises, you just got to grab it, haven't you, and make the most of it and try and get as much out of it as you can. Yeah, but it's that's the age-old problem, isn't it, with cohort studies? There's never enough money to do what you want to do.
Yeah, any last words before I give the floor to my colleague Isabel about this mental health issue?
Born in Bradford, just been fortunate that we've just secured a large amount of funding for the next 7 years for a project on mental health, young people's mental health. And well, the conversation started, I think, about 2 years ago, but the funding's just come through. I think there is recognition that it should be high on the agenda, stigma or not. I mean, we've got various communities here that deal with it differently, and some communities obviously have a higher levels of stigma, etc., attached to it than others. So there's that, but there's also, I think, what's coming out due to COVID is maternal mental health, which seems to be is beginning to be on top of the agenda again because of what women are telling us that they've experienced. And again, we're noticing variations in communities. So I think for us, it's going to be the next area of focus anyway. And hopefully we'll be able to take our funders and people on board with it.
Okay, I think I have a final word. Thank you so much to our speakers today. It's been really great to have you there, and I've definitely learned a lot, and I think we've all learned a lot. Thanks to very interesting questions from the participants. It raises a lot of new topics, new things we would have to discuss further. So I see this workshop as a starting point for many other workshops in the future. So thank you so much for today's session. We'll see you again on Thursday at 2 o'clock Central European Time, and really looking forward to our next session. And I wish you all a very nice evening.